And so the Giants 0-2 in the red zone. Jaguars obviously 1 for 2 in the red zone. And turning those failed opportunities into field goals instead of touchdowns is another major factor, and maybe even a bigger one than the Eric Flowers, poor performance, or the poor performance from guys like Omame and guys we'll get to later on. Nick, what did you see from this team in the red zone? And were you a big hater of the Pat Shurmur play calling in the red zone? Was it an execution thing for you? How do you see it? Dive into it, and then I'll give you my overall thoughts on that.
I think it's a combination of both. I think that you see in the first red zone trip, they're running 1-3 personnel and they're running duo to the right. And inside the 10, guys are going to start to, the statisticians are going to start flipping out over that in terms of success rate. I liked a couple of the RPOs that they called in the red zone, but outside of that, many people are going to hit the like I said, the first one with the reverse to Odell. And yeah, I don't really get that play in terms of trying to beat it brings into a bigger theme where the Giants did try to run a lot of perimeter runs, whether you're talking about outside zone, you're talking about reverses, you're talking about kind of speed pitches to the outside, where I just didn't, I don't think that's the way to beat Jacksonville because of their speed.
Right.
And Jacksonville showed they're not that undisciplined a defense where they basically caught Beckham, in the backfield on that play. So, mixed at best, but it does come down to execution on some of those. And the Giants did, navigate the new green zone that they love to highlight now pretty well. And so, I don't think it was necessarily all the play calling.
Yeah, and I think if you look at it, there's definitely teams you might want to try that on, that type of play, that reverse to Beckham. Like, obviously you saw the Chiefs ran a play that wasn't similar, but it was it was a perimeter run or they technically a pass because Mahomes basically like pushed the ball forward, but it was basically a perimeter run to DeAnthony Thomas for a touchdown. And I think like when you're using these plays, I actually don't think it's best to use Beckham on it because he's going to be highlighted by the defense. I think you want to use more misdirection where it looks like
right.
is designed towards Beckham's direction or Barkley's direction, and actually use a third or fourth, option on that play. But, they tried it and it didn't work, and it's going to have to get better because red zone issues were exactly what haunted this Giants offense for pretty much all 4 seasons under under Ben McAdoo. But diving past that a little bit, I wanted to dive into Eli Manning because I think there's been pretty mixed reviews on Eli Manning so far from what I've read about his week 1 performance as far as what the fans see. Pro Football Focus actually graded him out super high, and they usually have really low grades for Eli Manning. They had him as the number 1 graded offensive player for the Giants. On Twitter, it's a pretty mixed review from the fans that I've spoken to. I thought Eli Manning played a pretty good game overall. I thought he missed some throws. I thought both of the Beckham the Beckham go route he missed in the back of the end zone. That play to me was missed because Beckham got bumped at the top of his route and the timing was off. I think that's just a timing play. But at the same time, some quarterbacks will hit that play anyway, some of the better quarterbacks. And then obviously on the red zone miss to Beckham on where he had a ton of space right before halftime where they eventually had to settle for a field goal. That play, when you really look back at that play, the ball is snapped really poorly by John Halapio there. And Eli Manning is lucky to even catch that ball and that doesn't turn into a fumble. But then after that, he's immediately has to shift all his weight to the left side because there's an immediate rush coming off of Eric Flowers' side of the offensive line. And so he really has to rush that pass off his back foot. Now, again, like I said, some quarterbacks can still hit that ball off their back foot. Eli Manning's not one of them, but you take away those 2 plays and a few others that he wishes he could have back. And obviously, people blame him for that tipped interception, and I think that blame belongs all across the board, and I would actually give most of that blame to Eric Flowers or the Giants blocking overall, let's just say. I just don't know what else Eli could have done there. And in that game, people have to understand something about that tipped interception. At that point of the game, the Giants had gotten a lot of stops in a row on defense, and they needed to get something going on offense. And Eli didn't want to take a sack there. I don't totally blame him for that. A sack would have definitely killed that drive for sure. Would have had to punt it right back, 3 and out, put the defense right back on the field. And so he tried to make something happen. It's unfortunate it got tipped up like that into the air. That could go so many different directions. But, he has a few plays he wants to take back. But like you said, even like he broke down in that Ingram pass that Ingram dropped after the pass interference. That's a good ball. He placed that in a really good spot. And then finally, and he even admitted this after the game, the final pass to Sterling Shepard, that's on Eli. He said he's got to read that faster and he's got to put that ball out in front of Shepard. And he's right, because if he does read that play a little bit, it does process that play a little faster and get that ball in front of Shepard, that may not only be a catch for a first down, that might be a touchdown. So I thought he had overall pretty solid game. I don't think it was anything amazing, but I don't think it was bad as some people are saying. What do you think overall about Eli's performance, Nick?
I think the devil was in the details for him. I think he had some really good detail plays, then he had some pretty poor detail plays. We did talk about the read that he made early in the game, which was a blatant misread. I think that you see, he was trying to be decisive early, but I think you see some traits that you've seen over the past few years for him, where he'll stick on his first route, his first read maybe a little too long. That'll then derail everything else in the progression. So he's a beat to 2 beats late as he goes through his reads, and you see it just in some other details where he's rolling out to his right and he's throwing on the run. And this is a play I'm thinking about where actually it was to Ingram, where Ingram got a defensive pass interference call, but in the end, the play wasn't made, and the play should have been made. If the ball was there, he basically makes the play. The receiver makes the play. So you're seeing a couple of those types of things, and a couple reads in the secondary where, against cover 4, he's throwing that deep post that you referred to, the deep throw to Odell Beckham. That was a post wheel route. If he had looked at the wheel route, it probably would have been a touchdown. But I see the side of it where if he makes that first read and it has to be perfect, then he's got to be perfect. But there are other ways where he can win in this offense where he doesn't have to be perfect. I think it's just really finding that balance going forward.
Yeah, and that's fair. That's a fair criticism. I'm not trying to totally put him past any of these criticisms. Like I said, to me, just a solid game, nothing. But I just don't see, to me, I don't see where all the blame's coming from personally.
Right.
Stage of Eli's career, we know what he is, and still people want him to be something that he's not. And I think this, things are going to change when they don't have to play a Jaguars defense with that much talent across the board. They didn't have there were no injuries coming into this game for this Jaguars defense. It's the same unit that finished 2017 as the NFL's best, second most sacks, best pass defense by far. And they added some talent too there in the offseason. So I'm not going to judge Eli. Considering, the factors in play, I thought he played a pretty solid game. Before we move a little bit towards the defensive side of the ball, I do want to talk about some other things we liked on the offensive side of the ball, because we haven't even touched on the 2 biggest names yet, and we'll do that now. We'll start with Odell Beckham Jr., who finished the game with 11 receptions for 111 yards. His longest reception was only 24 yards. Obviously, that could have been a lot bigger. You talk about the deep post Eli missed. Eli missed another deep one to him, and he also missed the red zone play. That could have been a touchdown. There were 2 plays where the defense interfered with Odell Beckham Jr., where those could have been touchdowns if they didn't hold him back. And so to me, he just looked freaking awesome out there. He had Jalen Ramsey essentially shadow covering him for, I believe, my boy Weiss, Giants Daily on Twitter, said for 54 of 71 plays, Ramsey was covering Odell Beckham Jr. Obviously, half of those were zone coverages, and, he was responsible in zone. But it's still, the point is, against Jalen Ramsey, to have 11 catches for 111 yards with 4 plays, that didn't connect based on penalties or by the defense or, misconnections by Eli and overthrows, you could say that he had a pretty much dominant game, right? Is there anything I'm missing here?
No, I don't think so. He was the first catch of the game. He was right in the game script very, very early. And yeah, I think that is a guy that you want to utilize a lot. I think that, I think there's going to be more ways that we'll see as they bring out a few more of the wrinkles. And I liked him more on a lot of crossing routes for him, deeper crossing routes, not just the deep over that we talked about, but I think that's where he can be really deadly. And he was running more of the deep go portions of what we're talking about in terms of these route concepts. So I think that, there are almost maybe even better ways that he can be featured and be more effective, especially in the red zone too, where the windows are going to be smaller and tighter. And he was schemed open a few times, but you ultimately want this guy to be able to catch fades, to catch deep posts, to catch deep drags in the red zone. So there's plenty of improvement, but a lot of good things so far.
Yeah, I'm with you. And if this is, this is just the start, I think Odell Beckham, and you said this, Nick, yourself, you did a whole piece on this actually for Cover One. All right, but it was either Inside the Pylon or Cover One. This was one of the early ones from the off
Pylon, yeah.
For ITP. And it was basically like, you think he could be even better in Pat Shurmur's offense than he ever was in Ben McAdoo's. And I agree. I mean, look at this, 11 for 111 against Jalen Ramsey and the best defensive front the Giants will probably see all season, besides maybe the Philadelphia Eagles. And he's doing that. I think Beckham is in store for maybe his best season yet. I really do believe that after watching him yesterday. He looked so good to me out there, just explosive, getting open, tons of separation. And like you said, the routes could improve. He could be used. I liked how they used him on that 3rd-and-2 PA bootlet. It was like a rollout with Eli early in the game. I thought it was a great play call by Shurmur.
Yeah.
Obviously, earlier in the game, I don't know exactly what this route was, but it was a route where they created kind of like a deep rub route, and Eli kind of underthrew Beckham on the wide open. What'd you say?
Yeah, no, yep. That was there was a nice pick, and basically Eli was a little pressured, not too much. There was some stuff around his feet, and basically underthrows it. But right, no, the natural rub and pick stuff, the wheel type stuff. There's going to be a lot of that going forward.
Yeah. So I was very happy to see him, and then we're going to obviously dive into Saquon Barkley. So I did read a couple interesting stats about Barkley, I would say. For starters, according to Pro Football Focus, he averaged the most yards per carry after contact of any back, over 5.5 yards after contact per carry. That's pretty unbelievable. At the same time, he was also contacted at, and this is actually according not to Pro Football Focus, to NFL Stats, and research, he was contacted at or behind the line of scrimmage on 50% of his snap, or 50% of his touches in the first half. And then it kind of died down a little bit from there, but at the same time, not much. And that Jaguars defensive front was in the backfield on what seemed like every single play. So for me, with Barkley after the game, Pat Shurmur basically said we wanted to get Barkley the ball more, but it was not very easy for us based on what the Jaguars defense was doing. Is that something you saw a little bit of, like what Shurmur's referring to there?
Not exactly. I think Barkley was as advertised in terms of all of his traits and his ability to do all the things that we thought he could do, from both running between the tackles and then bouncing outside for big runs. But specifically for that, no, I did not see. I didn't really see anything they were doing differently. I think that if you're going to run 12 personnel against their heavy base or their heavier base, 4-3, it's going to be harder for him to find himself in space. If you have him out in the slot and he's catching a few more balls, maybe the screen game opens up a little bit more. I think as that side opens up more, you're going to see more room available for him on the running side of the house. Interesting.
And that's something we'll keep an eye on. I mean, I personally wanted to see a few more plays like we saw in the second half on that 3rd and 5, where it was kind of a design screen right away for Barkley, where they got the blockers out ahead. I thought that was one of the best plays they ran all day. And I wanted to see a little bit more, maybe a wheel route that was designed to go Barkley's direction. Some of the stuff we saw during the preseason, not during the preseason, but during training camp, the Giants really used that route a lot. And in spring OTAs, they really were hitting Barkley on a lot of those deep wheel routes. To me, I wanted to see a little bit more passing plays for Barkley, but hopefully we'll see that moving forward.
The other side of this too, just to jump in, is specifically with the wheel route. There's a great example from the Pittsburgh game in the playoffs where they're playing Jacksonville, and Telvin Smith is amazing at covering those routes. And Big Ben had to thread the needle for a Le'Veon Bell touchdown on a wheel route. But I use it as an example. I'm like, it's very hard to beat this guy laterally with speed and coverage. He's really as good as it gets. So maybe that's what Shurmur is referring to be honest, in terms of a lot of man coverage from Smith on the running back, whoever that is.
For sure. And I think that could definitely be what he's saying. I mean, this is a really, really talented Jaguars defense. They're so fast, and they have a lot of awesome players at every level of the defense. So that's just something to keep an eye on. So before we we go into the defensive side of the ball, and I think there's a little bit less to talk about as far as the offense goes remaining, but I do want to touch on a couple things I didn't like. I didn't like the play of Patrick Omameh. I need to go back like you do and watch him some more snaps, but he graded out really poorly on Pro Football Focus, and he didn't pass my eye test. What did you see from the first year right guard?
First year Giant, you mean? But yes,
Giant. Yeah. I've been bouncing around the NFL before this.
Right. No. So I think as advertised, as we kind of talked about, he's in the middle of the range in terms of a solid pass blocker. You saw the balance issues come up on a few plays where the defensive linemen are ripping him down and away, and he's almost falling over. Again, we're not trying to hide or mask his issues; he has them. But overall, I would kind of put it where I would throw him in the adequate to solid range.
Okay, that's interesting. And did you have anything specific? I actually thought probably if I had to just grade these guys 1 through 5 on the offensive line, I would have said I thought Solder probably had the best game, even though he obviously had some bad snaps. But overall, I thought he had the best game. Then Halapeo, and then I would go Hernandez, and then Omameh, then Flowers. Then I would actually thought Omameh played worse overall, even though he didn't have as many like standout bad snaps. How would you give me a quick rundown of how you would grade those offensive linemen if it was a 1 through 5 scale, best to worst?
I'll do it 1 through 7 just because that's the scale I use more, but that's okay.
No. I know what you're saying. I'm not saying giving them a 1 through 7 grade. I'm saying the best to the worst.
Best to the worst. Honestly, they're all very close in line.
Okay.
Solder got smoked at the end of the first half multiple times. Campbell single-handedly, I'm talking about Calais Campbell, single-handedly beat them all on multiple times. So their best player, wherever he moved along the front formation, that's where all the heads were looking when anyone was free and looking for work. And when that happens, they're trying to basically go to the place of biggest alarm. It was always where Campbell was, even if that was to Solder's side. Also, he really smoked Hernandez pretty good too. So honestly, I didn't do individual breakdowns for everybody, but I would throw them kind of all in the kind of like anywhere from 2 to 4 range, 2 to 3 range. And I think it's really pretty even. I think overall the offensive blame, again, if you will, is a third to the entire offensive line because of at times all of these guys look bad at kind of key points.
That's a good point. And you know what? It makes it to an overarching and overall point with this. The offensive line play has to improve. They have to find ways to improve it because if you dive into the numbers, and these are not independent from the usual norm with Eli Manning, the numbers I'm about to tell you are pretty consistent across his entire career. From yesterday, when there was no pressure, Eli Manning went 18, 24, 75% completion percentage for 187 yards. No interceptions, no touchdowns. Under pressure, he was only under pressure for 15 of his dropbacks, and he only completed 5 of 13, 38.5%, 37 yards, and an interception. And he was only blitzed 5 times, but on those 5 times, he went 1 for 5 with 16 yards. So, you look at Eli Manning, this has been the case his entire career. He's really been a quarterback who's much better when he's not under pressure. And now most quarterbacks are. That sounds like a stupid comment, but to me, the difference between him and other quarterbacks in this regard is much greater. So you look at that and you look at how they can find ways. And I think what we talked about before is definitely going to be in play, where they're going to have to get, they can't get this far behind the sticks on every series. And hopefully that won't happen as much against the Jaguars. But moving forward a little bit, before we dive into the defense, I did want to get your thoughts on Evan Ingram, who is also another guy who's taken a lot of flack right now on Twitter from Giants fans. Did you think he was as bad as other people thought?
I think, I got a question on Twitter too, the 2 to 3 drops that he had, is this an issue now? I mean, it's an issue, but how worrisome is it going forward? And yeah, is it concentration, or is it just the fact that he has bad hands or not as good hands as other players? What's really funny is as I dove into the scouting world, the more you dive into this on the receiving side of the house, for receivers, it's like backyard. It's like evaluating someone in the backyard. Either they have hands or they don't, and that's often a big dividing line. And I think his hands are somewhere in the adequate to solid range. And he has whether it's mental or physical. He drops some easy balls. So I definitely think it is an issue, and it's an issue if you need to feature the guy, in an offense where you're targeting him 15 times, which the Giants are not going to do. So an issue, but something that has been there and he's working at. But in terms of overall grade for this game, a couple bad drops. He had a great hold on his block, not hold, but a good block on the big Barkley run. He was dealing with Calais Campbell there, so saw a good flash there. He did have some negative flashes on the run blocks as well, so kind of somewhere in the middle of the range where he was before. But he has the ability to play consistently. But it gets back to your Red Ellison point about using him maybe more and giving Ingram and putting Ingram in other places. So overall, I did like it, but there are some red flags here.
Yeah, and you know what though? One thing I will add about Ingram that I liked is, at least on a few of the snaps that I saw, was his blocking. Obviously, he got a lot of credit after the game from Saquon Barkley, who name dropped him like 2 or 3 times when he was talking about why he was able to make that touchdown run. And I'll get your take on that in a second, see if Barkley was on point or if he was just kind of giving his teammate a little too much credit. And then there's a snap I saw recently, someone actually featured it on Twitter, where on one of his receptions where he kind of came across the field for a play that on 3rd down that was close to being a first down, where he reached out and just came up short. Also, not a great pass by Eli there. He actually did an awesome job decleating the edge rusher on the line of scrimmage before releasing out. So I thought that was pretty cool to watch. So I think he's improving, Ingram, and I think there'll be some big games coming for him. Anyway, though, Nick, if you wanted to dive into a little bit about the defense, I thought, not enough was being made about this defensive performance. So a lot of people have said it, have looked at it like this. Jaguars, they lose Leonard Fournette to a hamstring injury. They have Blake Bortles. They have Keelan Cole. They have Dede Westbrook. They have these skill position players who may not be name brand. So the Giants defense dominated. They pitched a shot in the second half, but they're thinking, who cares, right? To me, I don't see it that way for the number one reason that I think the Jaguars offensive line is pretty damn good. And because of that, I think that, when you're a defense that does well against a good offensive line, to me, it shows me more than when you're a defense that does well against a group of skill position players with no offensive line. I've always been a big believer in the trenches being the most important, the factor as far as the offense performance goes and offensive production. So I thought they had an outstanding game against an offensive line that really looked improved during the 2017 season for the Jaguars, and then added all-pro left guard Andrew Norwell this season. That was every other starter returned to that lineup. So what did you think from the defense overall? What was your overall takeaways from the Giants defense after pitching a shutout in the second half?
Yeah, I think, I highlighted some plays for cover1.net in a piece out today, and really good stuff from the secondary. Eli Apple, they showed the ability to cover to shadow guys in coverage early to mid part of the routes, just like we talked about on here. And he did it against difficult formations, against bunch formations, against speedy wide receivers, guys that can get downfield, guys that can eat up grass, and guys that can make, most cornerbacks, although they're not name brands, it's still the NFL. And these guys have speed. And so he showed a real good ability there, showed real good ability in his ball skills, and broke up some good plays. And so that's what Betcher needs, is corners that can lock down not just the best wide receivers, but any wide receiver on the outside, because it allows him to do other things on the interior, whether it be pattern match coverages, whether it be straight zone, whether it be man, and it all starts in that cornerback position. It's a little bit like how the Saints defense last year really became a lot better with the improved cornerback play. And that kind of all of a sudden the Saints became like a household name on the defensive side of the house, which just doesn't really happen that often in New Orleans. But to get back to it, I liked the secondary play. Jenkins obviously had a great interception, really good ball skills there, great technique. I broke that down on Twitter. You bring up the point about the defensive line to shift to the front seven. And that was really interesting because they had some really good pass rushes against the Jaguars' best players, against Norwell. Norwell was beaten a few times by Kareem Martin, actually, I guess on the Michael Thomas blitz pressure, it wasn't him, but it was that side of the line. It was Norwell's side that broke down. It was the tight end blocking him there specifically. But saw some really good stuff. And to your point, it's, the second half, they really pitched a shutout against a unit that, is still a little underrated. And so I really like the performance overall. I don't really, if you want to look at it the other way, I can't really think of anyone who's played negatively. There's really there's not like any type of scapegoat there at all for any of the bad plays that they made. And so it was good stuff.
Well, that's kind of a little bit of what I want to dive into there, because there were actually a few players who graded out negatively Pro Football Focus wise. And I want to see if you saw it the way they did or if you saw it differently. But first, I did want to touch a little bit on Eli Apple, who really has taken a lot of flack from Giants fans since last season. And he was targeted on four pass attempts, and gave it one reception for 6 yards. And they were hitting him. They were trying to get him with those back shoulder throws that, he was a little bit susceptible to during the preseason. And he wasn't having any of it. Eli Apple had an outstanding game. And Janoris Jenkins, in addition to having the interception, added 2 pass breakups and a team-high 7 tackles. And that just shows me, he's all in this season, completely in there. But a couple other interesting points about the defense, at least from a snap count standpoint, before I get into your thoughts on some of the guys who graded out a little more poorly than others, were, for starters, Kareem Martin played a crazy amount of snaps. Martin played 61 snaps. That was more than every single Giants defensive player, except for obviously the secondary, because the starting 4 there tend to play, every season, the starting 4 and the secondary play the most snaps on the defense, except for, during the Steve Spagnuolo years where they played Olivier Vernon and Jason Pierre-Paul on 95 snaps. But Martin played 61 snaps, which I thought was super interesting, including 6 snaps on special teams. And then after that, they really did stay true to their rotation. Dalvin Tomlinson, Damon Harrison 46 and 45 snaps respectively. Connor Barwin was next on the list with 41. BJ Goodson really didn't play as much as we thought he would. BJ Goodson only played 33 snaps, and Ray Armstrong right behind him with 30. And then Lorenzo Carter and BJ Hill, the two rookies who we thought would play massive roles on this defense, only played 24 snaps for Carter and then 23 for Hill, with Kerry Wynn getting in there with 20, with Mario Edwards getting a handful of snaps with 6. John Jenkins, another guy that just signed, got 8 snaps. So what did you take away from kind of the rotation there on the defense? Martin's usage, Goodson's usage, and BJ Hill's and Armstrong's usage and BJ Hill's usage. I know I just asked a lot there, so you can dive into one by one or just overall takeaway on that.
Definitely first with Martin. His high number of snaps, they moved him into the 3-tech inside a lot. And that opens up, obviously, then someone can slide into the end position where he played. And he showed the ability to flash moves down there, which I hadn't really noticed before. So you're seeing definitive improvement from him. And he's almost – I broke down Kerry Wynn a few weeks ago. It's almost like he's Kerry Wynn on steroids. And that doesn't take anything away from Wynn, but that's just the type of player he is down there in that 3-tech position. So really like that. Moving to the linebacker side, you're right. A lot of Armstrong. And you got to remember too, if your nickel defense is almost your base defense now because it's featured so much, that's where they were kind of splitting time directly with Goodson and Armstrong. And I really didn't have a problem with it in the sense that Armstrong played a really good game. He saw all of his positive traits flash. So I was okay with that. Even if it means that it takes away from Goodson's time. Ogletree had a very good game. You saw the best of Ogletree this game. Great sideline-to-sideline speed, good penetration downfield, not a great use of hands, but good use of hands, and ability to close and make plays for your team. It wasn't this coverage issue, the coverage issues that we saw before. I thought they would target him a little bit more at the running backs when they could. They were not effective there in doing that. Or for most plays for doing that. So good there. In terms of the overall snap usage for the rookies, I don't really know. I just think that when you maybe for the first game initially, maybe bringing these guys in a little bit more slowly than you would expect. But I don't know. I didn't really have a massive amount of expectations there because both had good plays too when they were in. Hill had a good stop, and Carter had a pass breakup, right? A real athletic pass breakup on a jump ball, deflected ball. So good stuff when they were there. But I think it's one of those things that in this rotation, I bet it'll vary week to week, kind of according to what they're seeing on the offensive side.
Yeah, no doubt. And you mentioned it, both Hill and Carter were effective when they were in the game. They also both earned strong grades from Pro Football Focus, who actually gave pretty weak grades for B.W. Webb, B.J. Goodson, Kareem Martin, your boy, and Ray Armstrong. So, we can't go all by the grades, and we gotta take a look into that a little bit more in depth. But
hold on a second, they really actually graded Kareem Martin negatively.
Yeah, Kareem Martin had one of the second worst grade behind it, Ray Armstrong.
You know why? Because of the zone read play.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, because that's really an outlier there when I'm looking at the breakdown of his grades. He really has strong grades across the board as far as tackling goes, pass rush. He's okay there. And then in coverage, on the few snaps he was used there, actually it was 1 snap in coverage. So that's interesting that they could even have a grade for that. But you're right. In run defense, it was way low, and I guess that's a lot because of the zone read play. So,
and just to jump into, I'm sure guys saw this who watched the game, but I guess the announcers were going crazy how the entire defense was fooled by zone read, and that's an interesting interpretation. All the players are watching their run keys in front of them and reacting accordingly. And the keeper part of that zone read, where the quarterback runs with the ball, it's the advantage that the offense has. So what you need the force defender or the contained defender to really kind of go out over the top and make a great play. On that play, the contain was actually the backside corner, and Kareem Martin did as he was doing and the ends were doing for most of the game. He was crashing down on the running back. So he was basically doing his job. Now, could he have been more aware? Sure. But the reason why that run was not an 8-yard run and a 50-yard run was because of the angle and the slip that Landon Collins had as the main force defender on that side as the deep safety. And so that's where that number explodes. And to be fair, not to jump into these guys' stuff, but this is why the grades aren't always the way they are, because you have to see how the defense, what the defense assignments are, or guess what they are most of the cases, and then grade out accordingly. But it's very hard to do that when you don't realize that the forced defender falls on that play. When he does, it's a wide open field for the quarterback to run.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good breakdown right there. And that goes to show guys can't always, we can't always go just based on the grade. We can use them as a reflection point, something we can also factor in. But, that's a good reason why you can't, buy completely into it and go all in with that. I thought, in addition to that, just a few more comments on the defense. I thought, like I said before, Bettcher did a really good job adjusting, finding a way to get pressure in that second half and not getting fooled by a lot of the things that the Jaguars were doing on offense in the first half. It seemed like they came out with a game plan, a really good one. Nathaniel Hackett, the offense coordinator there, and it worked in the first half until the Giants really adjusted down and fixed that. Did you have any other thoughts you wanted to add on the defensive side of the ball?
No, I think we got it. I think it's one of those things where Dallas is the next challenge, and we're going to jump into that. But I think they're sitting in a good spot. I think the biggest worry being the secondary, is now something that's a lot more shored up than it was 10 days ago. And, again, that's going to change. They're going to blow plays. They're going to miss assignments. All that stuff's going to happen. But overall, for what Bettcher wants to do 60 to 70% of the time, I think they have the personnel to do it.
I do too. And just before we wrap this up and get to a little bit of the clean, the preview of what we're going to be getting to next, I wanted to touch on a few of the injuries. Fortunately for the Giants, there was only one injury to worry about from this game. They obviously entered the game with some worrisome injuries. Olivier Vernon, for example, couldn't play due to his high ankle sprain. We don't know when he's going to be back. That's a big one for the Giants because I do think that his presence was missed. I know it was missed more so I think in the first half than the second half, but once the Giants kind of adjusted to what the Jaguars were doing. But I do think, his presence, even the little things like allowing Kareem Martin to play more at the 3-tech on those passing downs with the guys like Vernon and with Vernon and Carter and Barwin on the outside, the linebacker spots. And then but the main injury from the game was Wayne Gallman, who went down early in this game with a knee injury. Pat Shurmur today on Monday, head coach, said they're not going to give any information out basically on Gallman. It seems like he's more week to week than day to day. So we'll see what happens there. But otherwise, the Giants escaped this one pretty clean. And later on this week, once we get a chance to dive into the All-22 tape, which is going to come out Wednesday, we're going to do a little bit of more recap on just some things we saw and some things they might be able to translate. And then a big preview on what we expect in this Dallas Cowboys game. Like I said, it's going to be a really, really big game for the Giants. They have to get out to 1-1. They can't go 0-2 this season, I don't think, especially with how difficult their early season schedule is and how hard it might be to dig themselves out of that hole. As of now, based on what I saw, eye test first week, I think the Giants are going to win this game. I don't like the Dallas Cowboys team this year. I thought that they should have lost that game by a lot more than 8 points. I had a chance to watch through most of that whole game. And they, the Panthers had like 3 or 4 red zone trips. So they turned it like 0 or 3 points. So I think that the Giants have an advantage there, but we're going to see what happens because there's going to have to, it was a positive feel in the locker room after the game, even for a loss, which is weird to say. But I think based after last season, the players kind of saw like, look, we were, inches away from making some pretty damn big plays in this game that would have changed the outcome of this game big time. And the Giants had, even without those plays, the Giants outgained the Jaguars and won the time possession battle. So to me, I'm looking forward to diving into that. Nick, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, just more content coming. For me, I'll have I'll jump into a little bit of a preview on the writing side of the house, and we'll do more breakdowns as well, in game, out of game, on my YouTube channel. It's all there. TManic21 at Twitter handle there.
Awesome, guys. And again, if you guys did enjoy the show, do us a favor, find us on iTunes, subscribe, download, all that good stuff. But on that note, we're going to sign it off, and we will talk to you in a few days from today. When we have a chance to break down that All-22 and preview the Cowboys game. But on that note, I'd like to end these ones. Go Giants.